For the first time, I don't hate it. I think this book is wildly okay. I think it's the best poetry book I would have ever written in my life. And for the first time, I don't really care. I don't care if the book makes a lot of money. I don't care about the reviews. I did this as my own personal project, and I think it's a book I would buy personally. And I don't buy a lot of books.
Is that much of it? That's not much of a change for you, right?
My name is Kerry Kite. I used to load bombs in the Air Force, and now I'm a writer, a filmmaker, and an entrepreneur. Through using the post-9/11 GI Bill to go to college, working hourly jobs to pay the bills, and freelancing my way into a career, I've studied what it takes to successfully transition from service to civilian, and that study has become a conversation. On this podcast, I speak to other veterans, successful artists, and entrepreneurs about their transition, what they did well, where they failed, what they learned, and most importantly, how they applied their skills. Episode 99 features William Bolyard, an Army veteran, a world traveler, picture taker, beer drinker, fish catcher, reluctant poet, and the author of Dead Reckoning Collective's latest publication, Demons in the Taillights. Welcome. This is Veteran Made. This episode is brought to you by Go Pills, a nootropic that gives your brain neurotransmitter support both acutely and over time. Those of us that served in the military, regardless of where we served and in what capacity we served, all came into contact with different chemicals, different percussions, and various elements of our environments that have affected our brain's ability to function. Think about your brain's performance and your mental health right now, yes, but think about your future too. We have so much more control over our long-term health than we realize. Visit gopills.com and use code VM15 at checkout for 15% off. That's VM15 for 15% off. Give your brain the neurotransmitter support it needs to perform well right now and over time.
All right, we're live, kind of. Internet's working, kind of. I am here with Buck. Welcome back to Veteran Made.
That's me.
It's happy hour here in the Midwest, and I guess you're in West Virginia. Is that the South or is that the Midwest? That's kind of like right where they meet.
I don't really know, man. I think I consider myself the North, just because we succeeded from Virginia and during the Civil War. We were like, nah, we're not about that. We're out of here. So I'm the South of the North, the way I look at it. So East Coast time still.
That's what's up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there we go. I dig it. I love it. Cool, man. Well, welcome back. It's good to see you. Good to chat with you. We're here to talk about Demons in the Taillights, which has been a long time coming. I've had a PDF of it for a year or so now. I don't actually have my physical copy yet because, like a dumbass, I ordered 2 of the shirts instead of
That's fair.
a book and a shirt. So I'm sitting on 2 extra shirts, and I got my book. My physical copy is supposed to get here today. But I've read it on the computer, and I'm stoked to chat about it, man.
Dude, I'm stoked to finally be alive. I think it was probably the worst project I worked on in my entire life.
I think honestly that's as good of a place as any, because even when Keith posted from the DRC account to announce that it was going live, published, he's actually said something similar in that caption. So let's start there. What about it was made it so difficult for you, and what made it so difficult to birth this thing?
Man, I think so. I wrote the book, originally started writing it I think May of 2022 is when I finished writing it completely, and I think I started writing it probably around March of 2022. So I mean, I had some leftover stuff from my original book, so I kind of used a lot of stuff like that. But the original idea for this book was supposed to be like a prequel to like a novel I was working on, and then it changed from that, and then it changed to like another thing, and then it was really long. Originally it was like 310 pages, and I think the final version is like 260 something. So we cut a lot of stuff out. And I think for this book, I think it's always intimidating to get your second book out there. Like your first book, you don't really care about, doesn't really matter. No one knows who you are anyways. It could be dog shit and it's still going to be fine. But your second book is kind of like, okay, you're sticking around for a little bit, maybe, and you kind of care about money now because this is your profession, Hopefully, if you're gonna write 2 books, it's probably your job. So you're like, man, I kind of want to make at least a couple dollars. I want to buy a motorcycle, so that's where I'm at. And then like editing just took so long. I think I tried to delete the book like a couple times. I argued with them about it. I was like put my foot down on some things, agreed with other things. I think we finished editing when I was in Paris this year. So February of 2024, we finished editing. And I remember being in my living room in Paris, and I was like, fucking delete the book. Cancel it. Well, I don't want to do it anymore. I'm done, dude. And Keith's like, stop it. Stop doing this. This is the 3rd time you've done this. I tried to, I was in Vietnam too, and I tried to get rid of the book. I like sent like this big long email, like how I'm quitting, working on this book. And they're like, all right, just call him because he's like on the edge. I think this book was a title fight for everybody involved, nonstop.
Yeah, I mean, that's funny. You're bringing Keith's day job into it too, with him probably just making it real fucking hard on that guy. But it's going to make for a good read for me because so the version I have that I just had up that I was reading, it's funny because I pulled a couple of, I've got 2 documents open on my computer right here. I've got the one on the right. I just kind of pulled some pages from specific poems that I loved and wanted to chat about, and then the one on the left, I'm looking at a 300 something page PDF. So that must be the version. I don't know, whatever version it was that you sent to me last year or a year and a half ago, whenever we were getting ready to do this, when it was going to be published the first time. So that's going to make a good read for me because I'll go in and read the physical copy and it'll be a little bit different than the one that I've got digitally.
It'll be wildly different, I think. Because I mean, a lot of the edits that Keith made, like 90% of what Keith says, I usually agree with. It's that 10% that I don't agree with, and I usually go with the 5, and then I try to sneak in some shit at the end, and then Keith usually catches me. But I'm like 1%, I get in there, which is pretty cool. And I'm pretty sure I got away with a lot of stuff. What makes it fun, I've got nothing but good reviews on the book. Everybody who's read it has agreed that it's wildly better than my first book. Not saying my first book was bad. I thought it was okay. But this book is better, so that's cool, I guess.
What was it for you that was driving? Was it active? Was it like was it like disinterest, or was it active anti-interest in the work? Like what made you want to try to kill it?
Man, I think I was I really didn't want to do another poetry book. Like, for the life of me, I didn't want to, because I've completely moved on. I've written a short story collection that we're going to start first round edits in August on. I've like halfway through 2 different novels. Like, I'm just completely over it, and I was kind of worried that if I did another poetry book, I would get pigeonholed into poetry, and that's like, I don't know. I was concerned about that. I didn't think the book would be well received. I don't think this book is going to do as successful as my first one, just because it's very abstract. It's like this is like my art house project, and I don't think a lot of people are going to receive that well. I don't think a lot of people are going to get it either. So I think that's why I kind of wanted to kill it. I thought it'd be a better project to do maybe later down the road. Because I don't consider myself a poet. I'm just a writer. I just so happen to write 2 poetry books.
Yeah, because I think the last time you and I had actually talked about Demons in the Taillights, it was in the context of it being a prequel to the novel, or one of the novels, or maybe it was the short story collection. I can't remember, but I remember that it was supposed to be like a prequel to fiction. Mm-hmm. And so the version that I've read, so is that character that you open up with in the intro not you? Is it a fictional character? And because this was an art house kind of compilation here, do you blend reality? Like how autobiographical is this, and how fictional is the final product?
So it started off as a really fictional. I think with all my writing, I kind of just blend my own life into it, because it's easier. I think Keith kind of hit it on the nail on the head, because I was going to try to keep this like a third person like narrative the whole time. And Keith was telling me, he's like, man, you don't have, if we're abandoning the prequel idea, let's just make it you, you know? I mean, I think out of this whole book, there's still some fiction. Like, I like to do it as like a personal, you know, exercise. I like to write like fictional poems sometimes. So I think there's probably like probably like 15 or 20 out of that book that are just completely made up, not even real. And a lot of it is mostly the book. I unknowingly kind of wrote it as like my own personal journal, and that was my idea behind it. I was going to write it as a journal for a character I was working on, and it kind of just turned into my own personal journal of my own just journey of going through it. You know, like, and I think it worked out surprisingly okay, which is weird. So,
Yeah, how happy are you with the final published product?
for the first time, like, I don't hate it. Like, I think this book is wildly okay. I think it's way better. I think it's some of my best. I think it's the best poetry book I would have ever written in my life. And for the first time, I don't really care. I don't care if the book makes a lot of money. I don't care about the reviews. I did this as my own personal project, and I think it's a book I would buy personally. And I don't buy a lot of books. So, pretty okay.
A lot of new ones, anyway.
Yeah, I don't buy a lot of new books. All my books are dead.
What's yeah? What So with the give and the take and the push and the pull and working with Keith and Tyler to try to get this to where it is now as it lives in the world physically, how much push was there and how much pull was there? So as you say that, you said wildly okay, and it's a book that you would buy, and it's the best poetry book you would have ever written, which to say that is probably means you're pretty happy with it for you to say those things. So how much push was there and how much pull was there in that process going back and forth between those guys? Like, how hard did you have to push yourself to work to get this to this spot and get it away from your original vision?
I don't think it was too hard. Most of the mistakes I make are grammatical errors, just because I'm a art school dropout, and when I was in college, I mostly just partied and did a lot of mushrooms. So for me, what Keith goes back and fixes for me is mostly grammatical stuff. He doesn't change my style. He really doesn't change my subject. There's every now and then he just goes through and he's like, hey, maybe use this word. And I think about it and I'm like, okay, yeah, he's right. It's mostly me agreeing with myself on it. Keith kind of is the, guy behind the wheel, making sure everything's flowing in the right direction and making sure that it flows and the audience is going to perceive it well. But there's nothing real major change. Every single word is pretty much my word, and everything I've written is pretty much the same. It's just sometimes I would ramble on for like 3 or 4 pages, and then Keith would go back. He's like, you don't need that. Just cut it out. And I'm like, okay, fair.
Yeah, it's less about like how much did Keith change and more about like how much did you change? As you were talking about yourself blending into this character and this becoming like more of yourself in there and less of that character's sort of fictional journal, although there's still that aspect to it. That's what I'm asking. Like, how much of that push pull within yourself, how hard did you have to work to get there? Or was that just a natural process where you're like, I actually don't want it to be that thing anymore, so I'm going to turn it into this?
It wasn't as hard as you'd think. I just changed it from the third person to the first person for most of it. and then things that didn't make sense, like stuff I specifically wrote to be like a prequel for it, I cut those pages out. So that's where like the 50 pages went missing. And those exist in a drive in my laptop right now that we'll figure out what to do with on a later day. Because I've kind of even abandoned the idea of the novel now, because I'm like, I don't really want to write that at the moment. I want to be so far away from this project that like I just need a breather. I'm actually like on sabbatical right now. I'm not even writing anything. I'm just going fishing every day and drinking beer.
That's the other part of the writer's life, so that makes sense.
It's a pretty good job.
I do want to eventually, yeah, I do eventually want to get there because last time we recorded an episode, which was like almost 2 years ago now at this point, which is crazy. You had a very specific journey that a writer is supposed to take, where it was like poetry, and then journal publications, and then short stories, and then novel, and obviously we were talking about kind of how screenplays and things fit in there. But
Yeah.
you were talking about that very specific arc, and so I want to get back there and talk about how much you're looking at maybe deviating from that. But you're talking about being in the middle of some short stories and thinking about these novels. Like, how have you, since publishing Sober Man's Thoughts and then now being here with Demons in the Taillights, how much have you grown as a writer, and how much of your mind has changed about who you are as a writer, what a writer is, and like how you exist in the world, kind of in that role?
I mean, I think it's kind of cool looking at it from like a 2 years ago when like I had finished writing Demons in the Taillights, and now sitting at it with like on a shelf. You have a lot of time to grow over the 2 years, and I truly still believe that as your arc as a writer, And I have like probably like the only writer guy I take advice from is my buddy Douglas Hoover. He like writes really great novels. He tells me I'm a fucking idiot on that, but that's the only thing I disagree on him with. I still believe like if you could tell a good story in a poem, then you're probably going to be okay with like making a short story, writing journals, and then like you kind of like got to work your way up to a novel. Unless you just want to like write a novel and like edit for like 5 years and then maybe have something okay. But for me now, I feel like because there's a lot of self-doubt you have of yourself. Like if you're going to do this as a career, it's the arts, So for me, it's not really a question. I know I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life. I'm going to keep writing, and writing books isn't as hard as it used to be for me. It used to be like this big, like psychological torture, stereotypical what you see in the movies or how writers act. And now it's like wildly boring. I have like outlines and like, checklists and character developments and, synopsis on characters and all. It's not really that fun, the actual writing portion. But instead of taking a year to write a book, it usually takes me like, I think for my short stories, it takes me like a week to write now. And that used to take me a month. So I'm definitely, I finally hit my stride. I finally found where I am as a writer, and I found my own voice. And I stopped really giving a shit about what anybody else thinks about it because it's my stories. You buy my books, you don't. I don't really care.
Was that something you struggled with before, like carrying what people thought?
I don't really think so. I think I just cared about the money. I think I just care about the money less now.
Yeah, what initiated that kind of disciplined approach for you to kind of have that, like you said, outlines and synopses and checklists? Like what?
I was tired of it being so fucking hard, man. Like honestly, like after you're like 5 chapters into like a novel you're writing, you're like, shit, I don't even. Who am I talking about? What character is this? And then, that's like all writers have someone they kind of talk to about writing. Some of them have a dozen. And like when you kind of start getting like the professional side of it all, you're going to have somebody you talk to all the time. Doug is my dude that I talk to all the time. And he just laid it out for me. He's like, you're making it way too hard. You need to do X, Y, Z, nothing else. And I was like, oh, that makes way more sense. He's like, yeah, it's like anybody can write a book. It's not hard. He's like, you just have to have talent. You have the talent. Just do something that makes more sense. Follow the blueprint.
And you feel like when you follow that blueprint, do you have does the talent just fill in like the content for you? Because you said it's like, it makes it less fun, but it makes it easier or more simple to write. But like, where does the magic come in for you? Where does the fun come in for you? Where does the talent kind of fill up that cup?
Um, so I mean, the way it's less fun is I'm not like, you know, blackout wasted, just like doing lines and like writing stories anymore, which was super fun time to do it. Nowadays, like I just when I'm not writing, I'm writing. You know, if that makes sense. Like when I'm out there fishing on the river, I'm thinking about stories. I'm thinking about characters. I'm thinking about these arcs I want them to go on. I'm thinking about, hey, would this work? And I'll go over a couple lines. I'm kind of like talking my way through the story. And it's something I've always done since I was a kid is when I would write stories, I would talk my way through it. And I basically have like, I get the outline so in depth, and this is like more of my short stories. And like people don't take short stories very seriously, but I do. Um, and I will I'll tell a whole short story in like the 4 or 5 hours I'm out there fishing or doing whatever I'm doing, working out at the gym, you know, going for a hike, playing with my dog, drinking beer in the yard. And I go over these stories. And then once I finally get it to the point where I really like where the story's going, then I sit down, I write out character profiles, arcs, checkpoints, yada, yada, yada. But then it takes me like a week to write a short story and I'm done. Uh, it's just not as fun. I'm 30 now. I'm not like 22 when I started writing. So it's kind of like, it was way more fun being a manic artist. And now it's like a job. So you got to take it seriously.
Yeah, but it's got to be more fulfilling. I mean, I think about that with my creative work all the time where I used to judge myself, you know, whether it's writing or whether it's film or even whether it's work. Like I'm obviously very lucky that I get to do creative work for a living. I'm a professional creative. So I'm constantly thinking about those things. I used to feel very guilty and I used to judge myself for not being at the computer writing or being at the journal writing or like being in the deck, moving things around. When in reality, I was doing it actually this morning. Like I worked out, was doing some stuff in the yard, went to Lowe's, was doing some stuff in the garage. And the whole time I was thinking about two different projects I've got going on right now. And I was just doing what you were just describing, which is like writing, talking, telling the story, thinking about it, letting it play out a certain way, and then being like, no, I actually don't think that works. And then I would kind of go back to that fork in the road and then go the other way in my mind. And it's taken me a very, very long time to get to that spot where I'm comfortable with that. And I actually will go to sleep tonight thinking to myself, I was productive. That was a productive, creative day, even though I spent 3 hours outside not writing anything down, but I was going through all of those motions in my mind. And there was just like content that was just pumping.
I mean, it's crazy. Like, I think it's like kind of the natural way when you like kind of pursue a career in the arts. Like when you get started, you want to be the Bukowski, you want to be the Hank Moody, you want to be all these like super cool fucking bad boy artists, you know? And you could do it for a while. I don't think you could sustain it forever. I mean, even Ian Fleming's like has this great checklist like what he would do for writing. You know, you like go work out in the morning, eat breakfast, take a drink, you know, do this many words, and then he'd go out and do something else, take a break, get a drink, come back and like do the same thing over again. And I think that's kind of what it shows. Like if you want to be like a high caliber, like level of an artist, there is some discipline in it. Now the great side about it is I only work probably about like 3 months out of the year. And then the rest of the time I'm just fucking off and do whatever I want. So that is the bright side of the job.
What what were your travels like this past year? You were in Asia, you were in Europe. Like how much writing do you do on the road like that? How much of it is journaling? How much of it is notes in your phone? How much of it is all just in your head like we were just talking about? Like what's the kind of output look like for your off time in that regard?
Man, I rarely ever sit down to write anything when I'm on the road just because I try not to work at all while I'm out there. I just want to enjoy it. I do a lot of photography when I'm out and about. And I do like some notes on my phone, like if I'm at the bar and I'm having a conversation with somebody and something sparks something, then I'll get my phone out and, write something down, where it's a line, it's a character, it's something like this. And then like the great thing about modern technology, I can take those notes from my phone, bring them onto my computer. It's super easy. But I try not to ever really think about writing when I'm out there living it because it's like, I know I'm going to remember it. I'm 30 years old. I'm not going to forget what happens in Paris. I'm not going to forget what happens in Australia. I'm not going to forget what happens in Africa. And it's not like my work's not very autobiographical. I use my own experiences as a basis of a character, of a thing. Take those experiences, make it real. We're off to the races.
Yeah, it's more inspiration, like life lived as inspiration.
Exactly.
Or is it just life lived?
Which I think is like,
even like
I think it. I think if I wasn't a writer, I'd probably find some way to make this my career. I probably would have been like a photographer or something that involves traveling the world and doing these adventures, because that's just something I'm always going to do for the rest of my life. Like, even when I'm buying a house right now, which is the most lame thing ever to do, it's like really establishing roots. I'm trying to make sure I have a budget, and I'm trying to go so low on my budget and like still have a house that I want, so I can still afford to go off and like go safari hunting, go dog sledding, go snowboarding, go surfing, stuff like that. And I'm moving to a region specifically that has great rock climbing, great trout fishing, and great snowboarding. So
yeah, it's almost like you're torn between, like you're probably succeeding at, but like attempting to kind of integrate that like Bukowski beat poet kind of artsy fartsy way and voice, while bringing some actual like discipline and rigor to it. Not that those guys weren't disciplined and rigorous in their own ways, but it's almost like you're kind of fighting with that. Like, hey, do I want to be? How do I have this kind of voice? How do I have that kind of wild voice and live a wild life while also being able to be disciplined and rigorous in my professional output?
that's a great way to put it. I think personally it makes it harder if you're trying to do both. It's not impossible. It's just going to take all your time. Like, from the time I wake up early, let the dog out, go work out, do my normal chores, work on a story, think about something, drink some coffee, eat breakfast, go to the gym, go fishing, go do whatever I want to do for the day, sit down, have my social life at nighttime, and then repeat the cycle over and over again. It takes a lot out of you. But it's what I love doing. I wouldn't see myself doing anything else, honestly. And it's just, if you want to sell books, you got to do it, man. Somebody's got to pay the bills, man. Like, it's not free.
Yeah. All right. So two things specifically with Demons in the Taillights as a book that I find to be really fascinating. So one is, Dead Reckoning Collective talks a lot about, they only publish work written by veterans with an attempt to bridge the military-civilian divide. One thing they talk about all the time, Keith talks about all the time, is that not everything has to be war poetry, not everything has to be war memoir, not everything has to be about war or about service or about the military. You're the best example of that, I think. You talk a little bit about, at least in the manuscript that I have, Afghanistan a couple of times. And then you talk about suicide, both from the first person as well as from the kind of second and third person, in ways that I think are really important for our community to read. But I want to get there. But I want to start with, most of this book is not about the military. Most of it, the vast majority of it's not about service. The vast majority of it's not about war. And honestly, if I hadn't known you and hadn't known who published this book, you could read it and pull those poems out that reference Afghanistan and not even know that a veteran wrote it. How much of it is, at least on the surface, rather? So, like, how intentional is that for you? Like, as you're writing, because we've talked before, you don't necessarily want it to be that way. So, or you do want it to be that way, rather. But like, how intentional is it for you to just write these more, like you said, just art?
Kind of when I got into writing professionally, Well, when I started writing professionally, every book I saw a veteran write was about the war, you know. So kind of been there, done that. I think pretty much everything to be said about the GWAT has been said. Uh, I think maybe we will have like a great like you know infantry, like a Apocalypse Now style GWAT thing, but it's just not in our. It's just not going to happen right now. We're too close to the end. It's a 20-year conflict. I was on one of the last combat deployments that ever happened in Afghanistan. My last deployment was like I left Afghanistan in June or July of 2019. And we pretty much shot combat operations down like shortly after that. And I never wanted to tell a war story, but for anyone who's like fought in a war, like actually been in like a true no bullshit gunfight, it's something that's going to stay with you no matter what. Hemingway wrote about conflict his entire life in one way aspect or another, but he's an ambulance driver in World War One, but he saw true combat, and I think that's something that's admirable. And like I read a lot of Wilbur Smith, and a lot of his stuff is like combat oriented, but he's not telling his combat story. And I think if you served in a combat role and you want to write war stories, that's cool. Do your thing. That's on you, man. I just want to be able to take my experiences, fictionalize them, and tell a different story from a different light. Because my story is not that special. I was a NCO in a reconnaissance unit, did some cool stuff, but my story is really not that impressive. I don't think I'm that impressive of a dude. So if I write a short story about Vietnam, I can take my experiences, take them from Afghanistan, put them in Vietnam, and then make a really cool character and make it sound way more better. So yeah, just something I've tried to stay away from. I've always liked, art style books. I've always liked, the Burroughs. I've always liked Patchen. I've always liked Comanche. I've always liked these these guys who just wrote from their own experience of lives and made it in a introspective way that kind of would take you back and like really make you put the book down and think about what you were reading. And that's kind of what my goal is for writing forever. So I don't really think I could do that with a War Bad Make Me Sad story any more than anyone's already read it. So.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Are there ever times where that's difficult for you, or is it always like, hey, this is the approach I'm going to take, this, fictionalize it, and apply it here, and you get momentum and energy from that?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely. I have like two short stories that have like about like veteran characters, that I've written. One takes place from like a Vietnam guy, and one is like a GWAT veteran, and those stories, like, you're never gonna get away from it. I have to do it because like my heroes I've always looked up to were veterans. So it's hard not for me to have veteran characters. I think that's something that's like I struggle with a lot. Like when I think of like if I want to write a masculine, character, it's hard for me not to make him a veteran because that's what I kind of perceive as like, masculinity in its own sense. And that's why I look at it as like heroes and tropes. Like I think it's something I'm just always going to be around. I think it's hard to get away from it. I could probably do it. I could probably make a really badass, like, bull riding character, but I'd probably still try to make him a veteran just because it's just what I know. I don't know anything about the rodeo, but I know a little bit about cows and I know about veteran stuff. So I'd probably just try to do that. And I think it's just hard for anybody to try to get out of, I was in the military for 11 years. Would be impossible for me to run away from it. But I try to make an intentional effort to just be a normal person. I don't really wear a lot of veteran stuff. I wear old raggedy clothes from the 90s and Wrangler jeans. And I have a veteran license plate because I like the speed. That helps. But other than that, I try to, I don't really tell anybody I was in the Army at all, just because I don't really think it matters anymore.
Yeah, it's funny. It's something that I struggle with a little bit. I'm working on a few different projects right now, like creatively outside of day job work stuff, and one of them is a screenplay, and I'm outlining it. I'm in the outline phase for the screenplay right now, and there's elements that I want to pull from my experience, and elements I want to pull from somebody else's experience, and I know that person, so that one's fairly easy for me to do. But then there's other elements that, because I don't want to make it too autobiographical, and there's also elements of the story that I want to tell that just didn't happen to me, but like there's just the character wants to go in a certain direction, and so in order to take him there, he's got to do things that I haven't done and won't do. But I get real nervous as I work on that, because I'm like, well, if I pull a little bit from me, but not too much from me, and I'm pulling from some other source of something that I don't actually have experience with, I get stuck, and it makes me nervous that I'm not kind of pulling from the right ratio within those sources. You know what I mean? Even though, like you were saying, I want to make this guy a veteran. Like there are elements of this story that hinge on my own experiences, and then there's other elements of it that don't. And so I struggle to put those together. Not from a storytelling standpoint. From a storytelling standpoint, I could do it really easily, but just from kind of a self-reflective standpoint of being like, oh, I don't want to take somebody else's experience that I haven't had and add that to my experience. It just feels, I don't know, like almost gross.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I struggle with too. Like, the novel I'm working on right now, like, is like an old. He's like a Panama vet, but he's a LRS dude. Long range reconnaissance surveillance. Because I've never read like a story with like a LRS guy in it. It's something close to my heart. Serving in reconnaissance my entire career. And I was like, oh man, I did like so much research, and I was trying to get everything right. Try to get this like Panama guy's like story, and I was struggling with it with the outline. I think it took me it was like a month of just like doing research on this like very finite thing, like trying to get everything correct and right. And then eventually I was talking to my buddy Doug about it, and he's like, fuck it, it's fiction, who cares, make it up. And I was like, oh yeah, that's right, let's just get the story where it has to go. Who cares about the finite details? You're never going to get everything perfect. I read a lot of like historical fiction books, and then I remember it's not real. It doesn't matter. So, yeah, I think luckily I've tried to get over that as much as I can, and there's some times where I want to make a character like a certain way, and I'm just like, no, it's just my personal preference. It wouldn't fit the story. So, I abandon it. I think that's something every writer's ever going to have to struggle with. Cause sometimes you want to make the hero, but how many times can you make the hero, especially if you're writing multiple stories. And if you have a continuous series like Jack Carr has, it's real easy to keep that guy in the line, or it's like, Clive Cussler has Dirk Pitt. It's real easy to keep that guy, the guy, but if you're doing multiple different, non-consecutive fiction stuff, you're going to eventually write yourself into a corner and be like, well, shit, I think I've used that before. Now what do I do? And that's, luckily I'm not there yet.
Yeah, but you also bring up a great point, which is like the story is going to dictate to you where these characters need to go. And if you're writing a fictional story, at the end of the day, it's the story that's king, not the research. The research helps you tell the story. The story doesn't help you do the research.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing with that, and like one thing I'm pretty strict on, is I try to make sure timelines add up. Like, it's still a fictional book. Like, sometimes the timeline is like, oh, he's at the right place at the right time for everything. Like, yeah, that is what it is. It's a fictional story. Don't bust my balls on it, man. Like, you write a fucking book. How about that, idiot?
Yeah, for sure. All right, so Mac and I talked about this a couple weeks ago. He deals with suicide in his book in a really direct way, and you do as well. Obviously, in a very different way, because it's not memoir, and it's not necessarily speaking about strictly exact historical, be they personal and recent examples. Although maybe some of that did inform. And again, I have an older manuscript from you, and it has maybe more of those pieces and those poems in it. But you talk about suicide from a handful of different points of view, from the character's kind of first person point of view, from the second person point of view, and from the third person point of view. What was there? What was the intention there? And how difficult was it for you to kind of come at it from all those different angles and think about it from all those different perspectives?
The sad thing is, it's not that hard for me to look at it from that perspective. When I was 20 years old, my fiance killed herself, so I've seen the other side of it. I've seen what happens when, the person's not there anymore, and you have to go about your life, and then, that style of it. And I've been there myself, where I've struggled with the idea of suicide more. Just being, I think a lot of guys struggle with it at least one point in their lives. If you haven't, good job on you. But I think everybody, goes through that struggle at least once. And for me, I wanted to write it and portray these poems because, the book Demons of the Taillight is fiction, but the whole reason behind the title was the demons in the taillights are you putting it behind you. And that's kind of what I wanted this to be. I always kind of want to leave like somewhat of a message in my books. And for me, I wanted to write, a first, second, third kind of perspective on like what it actually is. Are you sad? Are you upset? Should you kill yourself? No. Well, it's too easy to say that to you. Then like you could take the direct approach and be like a real dickhead about it, or I was just like, okay, I'm going to write it from every perspective I could think of it. I'm going to show it in that light. And maybe, hopefully, someone will read it and, that'll change something. I don't think that'll ever happen. But, I wanted to do it purposely that way because I've experienced it in every single one of those ways. And I think a lot of people nowadays are struggling with a lot of different issues because we have so many different things going on in our world. And I think it's a hard time to be happy nowadays. And it's too easy to pop antidepressants and do your 9 to 5 and then save up for a house and fuck around on social media and look at people's lives and just dig your hole deeper and deeper and deeper. And I think that's a wildly depressing thing.
Yeah. I loved the way that you did it because it didn't feel anything other than, it didn't feel like anything other than just putting all of the perspectives on the page for people to experience for themselves. And I think because it's poetry and it's not like prose and it's not, memoir and it's not nonfiction saying, hey, here's a way to think about this. Here's a way you should think about this. It was more of like, hey, here's how different people are going to feel about this from each of these perspectives. And it gives the reader the opportunity to jump in and kind of be and feel as much empathy as possible, even if they can't quite have empathy because they haven't actually operated from one of those three perspectives. After you're done reading it, it almost feels like you have.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of my goal. I always try to. My goal always in writing is to write the most complex emotion in the simplest way possible, and I think that's something I have a talent of doing. It's something I've always been able to do pretty okay. And it's just something I always strive to try to make the reader walk away feeling something that they have never felt before. And if I can continue to do that, then we might be in the right spot.
Yeah, we might be onto something. So speaking of continuing to do that, you mentioned the short stories. You've also mentioned you're on a sabbatical. So what's next, and how are you kind of approaching the back half of this year and into next year as you look at output as a professional writer now that you've painted yourself into this corner and this is now your job?
Man, I'm on sabbatical right now because anybody who's ever had a book come out, when you're holding it in your hand and you're sitting there and it hits the shelves and you're looking at your Amazon reviews and they say 0, you start stressing, you start freaking out. Like, oh man, I didn't think it was going to do well, but what if it actually does bad? And what if no one reads it? And it gets very, very stressful. And any writer who's listening to this knows exactly what I'm talking about. So you want to rush into your next project. I purposely write 2 books usually at the same exact time so I can move into another project just so I can forget about it. But with this one, again, great advice from my buddy Doug. He told me to just don't do anything for a little bit. And that's kind of what I'm doing. I have the short story collection pretty much done. I have to write one more story that I just recently came out with that I recently thought of, and I want to really put it in there because I think it would end it very well. And we're going to start that in August, and the truth of publishing is that by the time you write something, it's going to be at least a year until it hits the shelves. So that's what I'm working on right now. Well, not working on really, but whatever. So August we'll start back to work. I'll be more serious, and I'll be sitting down at the desk every day doing lame stuff and editing and tweaking stuff. And then after that, I have a fiction novel outlined. It's an adventure fiction novel, just something fun. That's kind of what my whole purpose of writing is now. I'm never probably gonna write anything as serious as my poetry books, just because this is what it is. You had to write some stuff, you had to get it out there. I have probably 5 novels outlined and probably 12 completely separate short stories outlined that I want to write. So honestly, I'm probably going to be busy for the next 7 years on work, which is sweet. So yeah, I think everything's kind of just falling directly, and it's just falling directly where it has to be. It's my job now to write full time, which is a lot of people work their entire lives to get a book published. And now I'm just trying to get people to read my books. So that's really the only problem. Well, not really the problem, but
Yeah. Are you working with DRC on the short stories? You have publishers lined up?
Yeah, so DRC is going to be doing the short story collection. Tyler and me are going to be working directly one-on-one with that project, just because he really loves the short stories. He thinks they're awesome, which they are. I wrote them. They're pretty great. And, so they're going to be doing that one. The novels, I think I'm going to try to I might go traditional publishing with that one, just because I want to make money, which sucks. And if that doesn't work out, I'll probably just self-publish my novel, just because I need to make more money nowadays, because it's my job.
Yeah, man, you hit 30 and you have a job, and it doesn't slow down. It doesn't slow down.
Yeah, man. I got a mouth to feed, dude.
I love it. Sweet, man. All right, I want to wrap things up here. Where can folks find you on social to look at your travels and your photos? Where can folks go to buy the book, and where do you want to drive traffic?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram as Jess Buck. That's pretty much the only thing I'm active on. You could look me up on you just Google William Bolyard. Tons of stuff's gonna pop up. Click one of those things. My books are sold pretty much everywhere you can buy books, even on Thrift Book, because people are selling old copies of Superman's Thoughts for really cheap. If you want to do that, that's fine. I don't care. But the new book is on Amazon. You can buy it there. Leave a review. Unless it's bad, then don't. And yeah, that's pretty much it. You could watch me go fly fishing next month.
Yeah, don't leave bad reviews, but don't leave only 5-star reviews. Right? We want to make sure that we're helping our fam out on that front. Cool. So to end each episode, don't think I did this last time I interviewed you, but I've been doing it for a while since. To end each episode, open-ended question. What's on your heart? What's on your mind for our community right now? It could be a piece of advice, something you want to get off your chest, or something you want to reiterate from what we've talked about today. Buck, what's on your heart? What's on your mind?
Oh, man, this is a great question. I got this. For the veteran community, go get a hobby.
community.
like a fucking normal hobby, man. Just like go get a normal, like stop shooting guns for fun. Like if it's fishing, there's a project called Healing Waters. They will give you free fly fishing gear. They will teach you how to fly fish. If you don't want to do that, just go do anything else. Go touch grass, man. Get off your phone. Stop being depressed. I swear it's going to be fine. Don't use dating apps. Talk to people in the wild. And yeah, I don't know. If you're a writer, just keep writing. That's it. It's going to work out, or it's not.
Yeah, it's pretty binary. There's the only two options. I love it. Great answer. Buck, appreciate you. Appreciate your time. Appreciate your words. And we'll do this again later in the year when the short stories come out, man. Stoked to read those.
I'll be here. Glad to talk to you, man.
Peace.